Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt. With your hosts, Dan Green and Eric Stuart.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt, but specifically we're continuing our conversation about mentors. I'm Dan Green.
Talented voice actor, writer, and artist, I must say.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I'm joined by
Eric Stuart,
who is known for his voiceover work as well, and also a musician extraordinaire.
Oh, thank you, my friend.
You've earned it. You've earned it.
Thank you.
It's not just my opinion. And we've been talking about, in this discussion of the hero's journey as established by Joseph Campbell, various points on that journey, and we were recently talking about mentors. So part 2 of this conversation continues on that thread. So, Eric, you previously were letting me go on and on about people who fit that role for me.
Right.
But I think you deserve a turn too.
All right. So my next one, which sort of guided me into a career path that I was not expecting at all, was I was working. I had left school because I was not happy with that direction of my life, and I wanted to play music. That's what I really wanted to do. So, but I always worked. I always found some job here or there, and during the summers, I would go out to. We had a summer house out in the Hamptons, and my best friend, his family owned a tennis club, and so I'd always find a job there, or cleaning pools, or doing construction, or whatever. And I was working at the tennis club that summer, and one of the members came up to me and said, "Hey, Eric, I hear that you're interested in, working in a studio or something like that. I own a recording studio. My partner and I own a recording studio in New York, and we could use a new assistant. Are you interested in interviewing for the job?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I want to be doing." So I went into this studio, and it was a tiny little production house right across the street from the Empire State Building. Very cool location on 31st Street and 5th. And it was this tiny 2-room studio. So it had Studio A and Studio B. They were there, one was a little bit bigger than the other, a waiting room and a tiny office. That was the entire facility. It was New York style, right? Because you can't necessarily pay for a lot of real estate.
Of course.
And the woman that initially invited me to come and interview is named Amy. And Amy introduced me to her partner, Alice. Now, Alice Whitfield, I can even sum up Alice Whitfield in one podcast. It would be a miracle, but I'll try. So this amazing woman, she had done. She was in Jacques Brel's Alive and Well and Living in Paris. She was one of the 4 stars of that show. And so that was her sort of like launching pad, young star, and had gotten into advertising. She was a voice actress and a singer and a writer. She wrote musicals. She did all sorts of things that you could, just a multi-talented person. And also tough as nails, smart, funny, just hilarious woman and incredibly kind. So I walk in and she's tough with me, and she sees I'm actually a little shy because I've never worked in an office in my life. I've worked, I've done other jobs, but I've never had to answer the phone. And this is, to me, what's kind of funny about what I do for a living, and the fact that my biggest phobia was talking on the phone.
Really?
Yes, I have phonophobia, as we called it. I didn't like it, and I as a side note, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I find myself to be very good at reading people.
Okay.
And I read people with both body language and the facial expressions and just the nuance of conversation. And to isolate it into just the speaking, it makes me suspicious. I'm not quite sure what the situation is because, I'm from Brooklyn. I think everybody is trying to pull one over on me. But anyway, so Alice brought me in and she said, "Okay, great. Have you ever done anything like this or this and this?" And I'm like, "No, but, I want to learn and whatever it takes." So I started with the Karate Kid version of working there. I wiped down the countertops. I made the coffee, wax on, wax off. I was a production production assistant. I took the garbage out, things like that. And I learned how to answer the phone. That was a big deal. She would stand behind me and scold me every time I would, stumble or get confused, or, I'd have to constantly put the people on hold so that she could, tell me how to do it right, and then I'd get back on. But all of this stuff was invaluable. I mean, I to this day, we still joke around, she's like, look at all the things you do with your speaking voice, and you couldn't answer the phone. So she took me in, and it was about maybe the second week of working there. Clients would come in, and they'd go into Studio A, the big room, and I would still be doing my stuff, cleaning the kitchen area, making the coffee, and trying to answer the phone. And I said to her at one point, like, when do the bands start coming in to record? Like, do we do any music? And she said, actually, we don't do much music at all. We do some jingles here and there, but we produce radio and TV voiceovers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I knew you did a little bit of that, but she's like, we cast, we produce. That's what we do. And I was like, okay, I know voice actors are a job, but that's enough work to keep somebody, alive and, eating and keeping a roof over their head. She's like, yeah, this is like, they're like the unknown millionaires. And I was like, wow.
Well, and this is back at a time where that was true.
Yeah, exactly. It's
changed.
I'm right out of college. I'm like 18 years old, and, this is, late 80s. I learned in that studio from Alice. I learned how to run a casting session, do a breakdown when you get a script, which for those who are not familiar with the term, if it calls for a male and a female reading together, it'll how old they are, and that you make a list of the and you talk to the different agents and you get suggestions. You also ask for people as you start to know the actors that are out there. So I would run a casting session. I learned how to edit on tape with a razor blade from Alice. That's amazing to me.
That's why you went through so many computers when Pro Tools came out.
That's right.
You were still using the razor blade.
And a hammer when I'd get mad at it.
Right.
And so she taught me that side of it, and also the business side. This was a small company, so everybody was involved in everything, and how payroll worked, and how a small business...
What an enormous scope for you to be...
Oh, I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And also, as tough as she was... the humor and, just there were times where, things were tough for a small business, and we would try to come up with different ways that we could earn money. And the way we did casting, we branched into a little on-camera stuff like that. Alice was also famous for a New York supermarket chain radio campaign called Nick and Alice. Nick D'Agostino owned D'Agostino's grocery store, which was this great family-run business. And Nick and Alice would do this 2-character radio spot, and she wrote them, and she was so funny doing them, and she sang the jingle, which was on the radio all the time. If I played it for you and you lived in the New York area, you'd be like, oh my goodness, I know that song.
Right.
But anyway, so we went from all of that to then I was directing and producing for clients. The advertising agencies would come in, and I would be the in-house director and producer for them.
You stepped it up.
And yeah, and this is all, I worked there for 10 years. And basically Alice was like, I am going to teach you everything that I know and turn this over to you. She basically retired and said, you're going to run it. And so I ran the studio as well. So I was booking the sessions, and I was producing and directing, supervising some of the payroll stuff. And all of that stuff is because of this woman that looked at this, a very green young man who obviously wanted to be there, but had no clue about this business.
Right.
And taught me everything she possibly could. And the things that come out of my mouth when I'm directing or working on a project, they're her phrases.
Right.
I mean, I still say what she said. And those that have learned from me, it's funny. There's a couple of directors that took over for me, at 4 Kids and things like that. And the engineers will say, oh, my goodness, they're saying what you said. And I'm like, yeah, well, actually, they're saying what Alice said because those are the terms that I use. But an amazing woman. Just really helped shape me and introduce me to a career path that I really didn't expect. So she's number 2.
Right. I was just going to observe that when you put number 1 and number 2 together, it really gives a nice backdrop to the life that is your forefront, right? you can see how each of those impacted the course of your life in a very, very clear way.
As an independent production company, Andromeda greatly benefits from the support of its audience. If you're able to contribute as little as $1 a month, consider going to our Patreon page. Any support you can give means a lot to us creators, and we're excited to bring you more. Visit AndromedaProductions.com and see what's in store. If this is content you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share on YouTube.
And this goes to when we were talking about the apprenticeship or learning from someone who does what you want to do. Now, if you know what you want to be and you know what craft you want to, pursue, then great. You can go find that carpenter or you can go find that plumber or whatever and be that apprentice. But when you're in the entertainment business or you want to be in the entertainment business and you're not quite sure which skill you want to use,
right.
I didn't know to go and look for Alice because that was not what I thought I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a musician in 7th grade. I loved performing. So Mike, just happened to be the guy that was there at that time and was kind enough to take us on. With Alice, it was, hey, this is an opportunity. I should see what this is all about. And then I was introduced to something that I didn't know was even a full career. And that's another reason why I've said to a lot of the fans and the people that have come up to us at conventions and spoken to us about their pursuit is that you don't necessarily know what your options are unless you do a little bit of exploring. You might think, I've had people say, I want to be a cartoon voice actor. And I'm like, well, that's just a small part of being a voice actor. And then again, you might want to be just an actor.
True.
You might decide that I don't know if I'm good enough a looking person to be an on-camera person. I'm like, no. If you look at what's going on in the casting world right now, who knows what the quote-unquote type is anymore?
That's true.
So if you're talented, you might get a role on camera. So don't go in thinking don't sort of pigeonhole yourself like that because you never know what the other options are. So I'm all about exploring that kind of the journey is, well, where do I want to land? How do I know I want to be a voice actor? How do I know I want to be a musician?
Right. Unless
I meet people that are doing this stuff and I shadow them, Which
is, I hope, something that inspires people to make those searches. You have to hunt down your mentor. You can't expect it necessarily to come knocking on your door, as it might present itself in a movie or a myth, right? You don't necessarily have your greatness thrust upon you. Listen to what that creative call is within you and help yourself by finding a match to somebody who can take you at least a little ways down that road so you'll know whether or not that's the right way to go. Yeah.
So do you have a number 2 on the list?
Well, I opened with 2.
Oh, right. This would be number 3. I can't count. That's my weakness. My weakness is math.
No, it's all good. So I would be remiss not to acknowledge essentially all of my teachers at Rutgers. I also want to say a huge gratitude to all of the teachers who put up with my craziness, literally, in high school. I mean, they just wanted to see me graduate to the next grade. They were telling me to take home the test. Take it home and do the test. Just bring it back so I can give you a grade. They were really, trying to help. And anyway, so, but in terms of influence that I still work with every day, I mentioned in the last podcast that my mom got me these drawing lessons with a local comic book artist. Well, this guy, really nice guy, never was a superstar comic book artist. He taught me the fundamentals, though, of some drawing and in a comic book style. And so then he said, come up with some characters. And that was my first exposure to the idea that I should come up with something like that, as opposed to enjoying stories that I'm being told, come up with some of my own. It's a bit of a step up from playing with the toys from the shows that you like. Of course, you'll make up stories with your toys, right? Your action figures and whatnot. But they're still kind of borrowed characters, right? So I developed a couple of really bad, stupid characters, but great for if you're 10 years old.
Right.
And I also hung on to some of those ideas. And to this day, I have a character that I would love to be able to represent in some form. I was initially thinking in a comic book form back when I was a kid, but it could be a movie, it could be a novel, it could be a radio play, it could be an illustrated audio drama. And everything that I have added to my understanding of what makes a character, which comes up when you're doing acting work, and also how to write and create a story and what kind of story. Writing a novel is different than writing an episode of TV, for instance, or even a comic book. They all have their own specific elements, right? Their milieu, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank that illustrator for asking me to do something that I had no idea I would be so engrossed in doing to this day.
That's great. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And The Heart of the Cards is a great podcast, and Crossing the Gods is something that we've enjoyed working on.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the things that I just talked about there apply to what we're doing with Crossing the Gods.
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, that's another thing. Like, you were drawing as a young man.
Right.
And maybe back then you thought to yourself, this would be cool to do.
Right.
But until you actually meet somebody who does it for a living, you say, oh, wait, this is something I could do. And especially if they are saying, hey, you've got talent.
Yeah.
You know, you need some guidance. And when you actually see that it's a tangible thing, it's not so, out of, reach to say, well,
yeah,
maybe I should do this. And also, I think pursuing these things, unfortunately, so much of art is based on the amount of income you make by doing it, which is unfortunate because I don't think that there are many, many artists who did not make a living when they were alive.
So many.
But they were still very talented. And
yeah.
It's too bad that, you don't measure talent by paying the people what they're worth.
Right.
So a lot of times we say, well, that's great and all that you are an incredible artist, but, artists are starving, and so you should become a doctor. Now, I have nothing against doctors.
Right,
but,
right.
But sometimes when we see someone doing something that we enjoy doing and they're actually just doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, speaking about doing things, getting things, done like you know what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
What if we checked in with our friend, the wizard, Tips and Tricks?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. Let's see what the wizard has to say.
Welcome to Wizardly Words of Wisdom. I am your host, Tips and Tricks, and today, or tonight, or, well, you could be listening to this in the afternoon, or even the evening, I don't know about that. But I do know a few things about writing a book. First, start with writing a short or shorter story. Everyone wants to make a grand novel, but maybe start with baby steps first. That way you get to really understand what the craft of writing is all about. Second, keep a list of inspirations. That could be anything from characters to themes to locations or anything that gets those creative juices flowing. You never know when they'll come in handy. And third and finally, eliminate distractions. Virginia Woolf once wrote, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write." This has to do with eliminating those things that busy the mind that have nothing to do with what it is you're trying to write. An author must have time to concentrate, a time to imagine, to bring the right words to bear. And finally, and third, did we already do 3? I'll give you one more, just because I like you. Find your own voice. Yes, we may imitate those we admire, but don't forget, you makes you unique. You see what I did there with the spelling and the letters and the words? Oh, dear. Well, that's all I have for you for now. I'll look forward to the next time where I can share with you some wizardly words of wisdom.
Once again, some clear, constructive advice about how to approach something, especially something that you haven't done before. I mean, who knows if you're going to be a great author, right? But you gotta listen to those, things that pull on you to try something new.
Exactly. I mean, look, there's no guarantees, right? But you've got to follow what motivates you, right?
You're touching on something that reminds me of a part of a conversation I like to have with any of the students that I'm working with. Evaluating why you're pursuing this creative thing. Typically, I'm having this conversation who are coming here to learn how to do character work. And I need to make sure they understand how unlikely it is that they'll make any relevant amount of money doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But why are you doing it? Does it have value because it brings money, or does it have value.
Right.
Because it's a good thing to do.
Exactly.
I know for myself that when I'm in a show, a series, or what have you, or I'm doing audiobooks for a couple weeks or whatever, I generally have a better outlook on life because I get something out of performing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something I enjoy doing. And so I think it is unfortunate that people feel forced to choose between an economic choice and a creative choice so often.
Right. And if you can find a job that pays your bills but gives you the flexibility to be an actor or musician or whatever, that's the magic, equation.
Yeah.
Which is why many actors are waiters or things like that are in the service industry, because they think I could switch my schedule. I can work nights and have my days free for auditions. Those are choices too that you need to make. I mean, I've never been in a position where I wasn't working. I wasn't finding a way to earn money to then pursue the thing that I wanted to do. And of course, I'm definitely I find myself, I'm definitely lucky that the thing that I do to earn money is something that I also enjoy doing, which is, of course, voice acting. But that's my gig. That's my quote unquote. That's my job.
Right, and your passion is more your music.
Right, but both things are things I enjoy.
Right.
And it's great but it's still one must be responsible and not feel like, because then you get the pressure of, well, I'm not making enough money doing any of my music, so I'm going to stop doing it.
Right. There's a coexistence that can happen.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I'm going to say the third mentor, and I think this is my third of three.
Okay.
Is so when I was touring with Ringo and the All Stars, the group was made up of some of the greatest classic rock musicians around, and one of them was Peter Frampton, and Peter.
Yeah.
And Peter and I became friendly on the tour. I wasn't really hanging with those guys too much. I was the solo opening act, so at least I could hang out with them and not crowd them, as if I was traveling with a full band. But we struck up a friendship, and he was kind enough that when we finished the tour, offered to produce my album and to come down to Nashville to do it. And so this was a big deal. I had watched. What I would do is I would play my set, and then I'd step out into the audience and watch the All-Stars play every night, basically being a sponge and watching the interaction, watching the musicianship, but also I think the most important thing that I was trying to digest was the performance side, the art of, if things weren't going right, how do you make it so the audience doesn't even notice? If you were playing the same songs every night for 30 nights, how do you make it fresh every night? Because that audience is a different audience. How do you bring that same show without seeming like you're, I'm so exhausted, or I'm bored with the stuff. I've been playing these songs forever. And I watched Peter do this every night with the band. These were things that I was, tucking away in my brain, going, okay, take note, do that. That's good. Okay. Things that didn't work, things that did work. And then we went into the studio together, and I got to really work very closely with him. And beyond the music and the production and the thrill of working with someone like that in the studio, what was really so educational for me was when you are working with someone that is so well known, loved, has had incredible fame, and still can look at a younger person who is in the business and say, I'm going to give you some information, I'm going to give you some guidance of how you take this journey. I'm going to tell you the things to be aware of, the good stuff, what to savor, what's not important. And it was really, truly an education. Because, we look at people who have great success, and we think they are only the roles they've played or the music that they play, and you forget that they're just people.
Right.
And the mentorship was very much so that it was like an older brother.
Yeah.
Sort of saying, okay, I'm like, 10 miles ahead of you on the road, and I'm going to tell you what to look out for. And I'm also going to tell you as you're driving down that road, what things you should stop and look at and enjoy.
That's amazing.
And so the friendship has lasted for, now we're getting close to, it's got to be close to 20 years. It's one of those things where even if he wasn't in the music business, the fact that I was lucky enough to have this friendship with someone who could give me advice that I don't think anyone else could because he'd been through it on so many levels.
Right.
And also believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
We work so hard in our craft, and it's usually our peers that we're trying to say, like, get some sort of affirmation of like, hey, hey man, Dan, that was a great performance, in that show. I loved your voice work in that show. And it's like, thank you. Because that's coming from not just a fan.
Right.
Because I am a fan of your work, but that's someone who's, we're contemporaries. We work in the same industry, and when you're recognized by somebody that works in the same industry, you're like, oh, okay, you hear the nuances I'm doing.
Yes.
Now this is someone who is much more famous and has accomplished much more than I have, but getting his approval and getting someone like that to believe in my work,
yes,
it's like. I love having the numbers of people that like it, like the music or like what I work on. It's fantastic. I'm very blessed to have a strong fan base. But sometimes it's more meaningful to have one person that you respect.
Sure.
Respect what you do.
Yeah.
That's
true. And when that happens, it really resonates in a different way.
Yeah.
In a very unique way.
Yeah.
And with that, I will bring this conversation to a close for the time being. But before we go, I just wanted to offer a little bit of how Joseph Campbell defines a mentor. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit about what he says about it. For those who have not refused the call, meaning the call to adventure, the first encounter of the hero journey is with a protective figure, often a little old crone or old man, who provides the adventurer with amulets against the dragon forces he is about to pass. What such a figure represents is the benign, protecting power of destiny. The protective power is always and ever present within or just behind the unfamiliar features of the world. One has only to know and trust, and the ageless guardians will appear. Thanks for joining me, Eric.
Thank you, Dan.
And we look forward to you joining us for our next conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stuart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.